Hello, and welcome to We Live for Saturday, your favorite college football podcast. I'm your co-host, Mike. With me, as always, is your other co-host, John. But, John, we have a very special guest tonight.
Yes, we do.
He is, you all probably know who he is, but if you don't, he's kind of the biggest Big Ten guy on the block. He even goes by Big Ten Ted.
How we doing?
Awesome.
Fantastic. Yeah. Good to
How
be,
you doing, Ted?
here, man. How are you doing?
It's great to be here. You know, even though I am in the amongst of a couple of rodents here today, it is good. It is good. You know, there are, you are some of the best gophers certainly that I know out here, despite living in your territory, enemy territory, certainly here now. It's good to be here. I know we're going to be talking about more than just Wisconsin football here today, but I think we got a lot to talk about. I listen to your guys' show as much as I can, certainly. So it's good. I think it's going to be a good discussion today.
Well, we appreciate that, and we listen to your show all the time.
Yes.
And for all of those in the audience listening right now, we will have obviously now we're recording. We will have Ted's stuff linked so you can go see his work directly, and it's Big Ten Ted on YouTube, I believe.
That is, you can find it on YouTube. You can find it on Twitter. Audio is Spotify and Apple right now. So, you know, it's all out there. It's all out there for everybody to see, certainly.
Yes. I mean, I always watch on YouTube so I can see your smiling face. But, but if people want to do the audio only, they can.
There you go. We'll give them the option.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. Yes, you do an awesome job. Definitely. I think I found out about you, I want to say, during the late in the pandemic.
Wow. So you were early. You guys were early.
Yeah. Well, John actually was first. He turned me on to you.
I think I started watching your show honestly, it may have even been the first episode, but at least like within the first 3 to 5 episodes, man. And it was the pandemic, and I was just hungry for college football content and Big Ten content because there wasn't that much out there. And you kind of started this whole thing, and I watched it grow into what it is now, and it's very impressive, man. You've really come a long way, and you deserve all the accolades, and you're killing it, man. So
during COVID is when it all started. I wish I could remember. Sometimes I look back at those videos and I'm like, oof. Some of the things that I think I predicted, especially with like conference realignment and all that stuff, because that's kind of what kind of got things because I think that kind of video got more recommended when Texas and OU joined the SEC, and how the YouTube algorithm works is kind of when one big piece of news happens, then things that are related kind of get pushed to the forefront as well. So, but yeah, those were, those were good days when we were all sitting in our basements with no football. Thanks, Kevin Warren. With no football there in the fall. So at least for a little bit. But yeah, it was good times, and I appreciate it. So it's been a good run. It's been a good run, certainly.
Yeah. Well, I think we want to give you an opportunity here, and we obviously talked about it at pre-show, that you do such a good job of keeping your biases in check when you're doing your show, and it's fantastic, and I think that's there's definitely a mass appeal there. But we want you to put on your fan hat, like really go all in, be all Wisconsin, all Badgers, all the time, and be as extreme as you want to be. That's what we're here for, and we want to let you do that and let you let loose on that a little bit, because we know your history as a Badger fan goes back quite a ways.
Yeah. I grew up in the state of Wisconsin, about an hour north of Madison, right between Madison and Green Bay. And man, growing up, I was born, just had a birthday in 1991. So if you kind of do Barry Alvarez became head coach just a year before I was born. I think it was in 1990. He came over from Notre Dame. And, so all I've really ever known prior to these last couple of years has been Wisconsin success. It's like, all right, what do? We churn out an NFL running back. We churn out an NFL offensive lineman. You win 7 to 9, 10, whatever games a year. You go to a good bowl game. Sometimes you win it. Sometimes you don't. Maybe you go to a Rose Bowl. Maybe you win it. That's just how it was. And that's why maybe the conversation today is going to be very interesting because that's not how it is certainly right now with this team. Like, yeah, man, they had some really good. I went to 2010 when they beat number 1 Ohio State, and that that run, 2010 in this, and then 2011 went to a game when they played Nebraska, which was Nebraska's very first Big Ten game. College Game Day was there. That was, and then I think we went to a Big Ten clincher against Northwestern before the Big Ten. That might have actually been back in 2010. It kind of gets a little bit fuzzy sometimes up there, but yeah, those were some great years with Brett Bielema certainly in there. So it's things have kind of changed a little bit, haven't they? But preparing for this, I was kind of reminiscing over some of those great memories, and even going back to like late Barry. Even though Wisconsin wasn't maybe contending for Big Ten championships like they were in like when Ron Dayne was there and 98, 99, 2000, that kind of thing. Like it was, they were still churning out good years.
Oh yeah.
9-win years. I remember they beat, I think they beat Auburn in an Outback Bowl. I think that might've been Barry's last game coaching there, I think, something like that. You guys know about beating Auburn in an Outback Bowl. It's to be able to look back and kind of think about those memories. It's been interesting really preparing for this and then kind of dealing with what's going on right now in Madison.
Yeah, I don't remember anything pre-Barry either. So as far as I was concerned, he was a mythical evil figure to me growing up.
Or maybe as Minnesota fans, you do want to remember what Wisconsin football was like pre-Barry. So
I wish I did.
Reverse psychology. I actually I remember back in the day, I read this book. It was called Red Ink to Roses, about the rise of Wisconsin's football program. Red Ink, obviously being in the red, not so good. To Roses, of course, winning a couple of Rose Bowls. And that was something that really got me a little bit hooked into Wisconsin football. And also my parents own a small business where they've been selling fresh produce on the farmers market in Madison for the last 30 years. So I've been a part of a lot of game days on Saturdays, whether I've been at the game or whether I've just been blocks from Camp Randall Stadium. So it's kind of it's in there, man. It's in there, so even though I'm a lot more unbiased, certainly these days, it's certainly hard to get rid of it.
Of course. Well, we love that.
No, that's awesome. And it's cool to hear, your background and how much, Wisconsin means to you. John, I hear a little echo. Do you suddenly?
A little bit.
Maybe you need to put it, I think it's on your end.
Okay, let's see. Is that helping at all?
Let's see. Yep, that helped.
All right, hold on. Let me put my headphones back in too. That might help.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, continue.
I was just like, the last thing I want to do is finally have Ted on an episode and then have it echo the whole time. That'd be terrible. Just be depressing. That'd be like certain Axe games I want to forget, Tell you about the time when I almost got run out of a bar during an Axe game going the wrong way. And that's not an on-the-air story. That's an off-the-air story, but I'll be happy to tell you that one. That got ugly between me and a certain Wisconsin fan who was in that bar. But yeah, let's shift gears. I love that we've got the Wisconsin fan version of Big Ten Ted on here, but let's all be Big Ten fans together here and talk about the college football playoff. Mm-hmm. And we thought we had a consensus between the Big Ten and the SEC coming into meetings. We thought that everyone was together on wanting auto bids, but somewhere along the way, the SEC threw kind of a curveball, and now they really want the 5 conference champions plus the next 11 at large, highest ranked seeds kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, Ted, I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this whole debacle because it's a lot.
Yeah. On my most recent episode of Big Nation, which is the long form show of kind of what I did, I had I call it a controlled rant. It wasn't kind of maybe my full feelings, but I called it a little bit of a controlled 9 or 10 minute rant of what this thing is. And it's crazy. It's how highly the SEC thinks of themselves, considering this year what we were doing, what are we doing, 5+7 format in that right now. And they got three teams in, I believe it was.
And then you think the world had
And then, so Big Ten obviously got 4. in that season. So you would think, the 4-4-2-2-1-1 need a name for that because that's a lot of numbers. But, they would think that that would be a format, getting 4 teams in every year. And like everybody thinks it's 4, but it's really 6 because 6 teams have a way to play themselves into the national tournament with these conference playing weekends. And I'm sure we can get into more of that as well. But I think the thing that really irked me the wrong way, and I think it really irked a lot of people the wrong way, was at these meetings. They are literally handing out pamphlets to the media as this is like when I'm a big history guy. When you look up and you kind of study throughout history, propaganda. This is literally what it is. I am giving you a piece of media to influence the way you think about things. And if you kind of dive into it a little bit, okay, why are they doing this? Why are they handing out these pamphlets? Why are they trying to say, hey, based on these metrics, our conference is so much better, it's so much more difficult? It's because they want to alter the selection criteria of the College Football Playoff Committee, which does what? It puts more of an emphasis on the College Football Playoff Committee, which, hey, this is just one man's opinion. Less College Football Playoff Committee, the better. I've kind of been watching. I've been really, really watching a lot more of these kind of everybody's thoughts on this, from national people to people who have team-specific podcasts, to team who have conference-specific podcasts. I've really been trying to take in as much information as possible, and there's been some really good, I think, alternatives out there with this auto bids format, which the Big Ten is certainly backing right now. I think on Joel Klatt on his show, he's like, okay, you have all these conference plans, right? And, you could have 9 or 10 teams possibly in the Big Ten or the SEC involved in throughout the month of November, starting in the beginning of November. You could have a bunch of teams trying to get into those 6 play-in spots. And then, I personally think the 14-team model as opposed to the 16-team model is maybe a little bit better. And it's just hey, well, everybody else is playing a play-in game on what would have formerly been Conference Championship Saturday. Why not have for that one wild card spot? Why not have, whether it's, if Notre Dame is in the top whatever at that point, hey, have Notre Dame versus somebody. So they also have to play themselves in. It could be Notre Dame. If Notre Dame, it's basically just the top 2 teams that are not playing in we'll call it the conference tournament, for lack of a better term.
The at-large teams.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So all of that, for so many years during bowls and polls, during BCS, 4-team college football, I should say before the 4-team college football playoff, what did everybody say? We got to settle this thing on the field. And I agree with what Joel Klatt has recently said on his show. He's like, well, a 5+11 or whatever the model is, that's settling it in the boardroom with a committee that, I don't need to tell you guys twice. I think we know where the committee maybe certainly steers in terms of everybody. You guys have biases. I have biases. It's just the way humans are wired. So if you can take more humans out of the equation onto the field and have these types of high stakes playoff games towards the end. Look, I know the general concept of auto bids. It's a little bit weird where you got these conferences have more and then these conferences have less and something like that. And I get that. And I understand those people, that way of thinking. But yeah, this is quite the turn for the SEC, certainly as of late. And now the 2 teams that really control the 2 conferences that control what the playoff is going to look like now are in opposite direction. So that creates something that's very interesting as well. And now we know the Big 12 supports the 5+11, which I don't know about that. I don't know about that for them. If I'm the Big 12, I'm sitting there a year where I just got 1 team in the college football playoff. If this thing goes to 5+11, you're going to have Ole Miss. You're going to have South Carolina. You're going to have Indiana. You're going to have Iowa. You're going to have Minnesota. I wish I could say Wisconsin. You're going to have these types of teams. It's not going to be Big 12 teams. I'm sorry. No. It's not going to be. So they're saying, Brett Yormark is trying to say all the right things and get some positive PR out there and say, hey, let's settle it on the field and all that. It's okay. If that's the way your conference wants to go, I'm not sure what your conference is going to look like in a couple of years. So, it's just odd. I think everybody can look out there, and I think everybody kind of sees this auto bids format, and they just get really spooked by the numbers that each conference has attached to them. And I don't know what exactly is going on with the SEC. Maybe they think, hey, we're better. We can get way more than 4. Why limit the almighty Southeastern Conference to just 4 automatic bids? So
they would have had 6 last year if it was a 16-team field.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the way. Maybe they think they deserve more than 4 right now. Hey, we can get 5 in every year. We can get 6 in every year. Why limit us to 4? And so
when you
I don't know.
When you play 8 conference games in a layup in late November, like that. You can get more than 4 in, absolutely.
And that's the conference games is a huge. It's a huge thing right now, because if we go to a 4-4, 2-2-1. 1 would be 14, and then 3 would be 16. That's going to get the SEC that 9th conference game. I think I heard something like it's going to be like an extra. We know like college football is built on money. Like that's just, that's just why we've gotten to this point with conference realignment and postseason, all this stuff, right? But yet the SEC is sitting out there, and I think I heard like an extra $3 to $5 million per team year, per school. Yeah. If they go to a 9th conference game. Okay, so you're telling me you're going to say no to up to $5 million per year. Okay, that's first of all, that's number 1. And then number 2, okay, we talked about the conference play-ins. That's 2 more games on conference championship weekend that are going to be a part of the SEC package. And you got to imagine those are some pretty valuable products. Like that's going to be the thing. If we do go to an automatic bids, at the very least, the SEC deal and the Big Ten deal, TV deals are going to be renegotiated, because now you're adding 2 more games on conference championship weekend, especially for the SEC. So that's some money to turn down. I know why the coaches are turning it down, because I think it's not just the playoff schools. It's not just Bama, Georgia, Tennessee, whatever. It seems like that. It's not just them. It's Mississippi State. It's Vandy, it's Kentucky, it's some of these lower tier SEC schools where it's like, well, I get to bowl eligibility having only playing 8 conference games, and I get to play Furman in November. Whereas if I'm Kentucky, for example, and I had to play Texas A&M in 1 more game versus Furman, I'm not becoming bowl eligible. I'm not getting those extra team practices.
Because it's 8 more losses. It is 8 more losses for the league.
Correct. I'm not getting all of that. I'm not getting that bowl payout, right? You just go down the list of all of those things that are there as well. So, I mean, we know they're trying to rig the system. We get it. And that's what I said. I'm not,
they're trying to rig a system that's already rigged in their favor, though. That's what's so crazy. Like,
yep. Yeah, it's we need to find a way, and this is very obvious. Need to find a way to get on the same playing field. Like, if it were up to me, every team is playing 9 league games. I don't want the Big Ten. Here's another thing I don't want. I don't want the Big Ten to be like, well, you're not going to play 9 and we're going down to 8. Back down to 8. I do not want to see that happen. I think we should the conference should stay at 9 games, regardless of what happens. But there's so many positives, I think, from going to this auto bids format. Better non-conference games. You're going to have more teams with high stakes football games in November. You're going to have those 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5 play-in games. Like, you're going to have just so many things, I think, that are in line to having competitive football. And I think that's what we all want as fans. We want competitive football in September, October, November, and December. That's what we want. And I think this 5+11, I think a lot of people see what's happening. It's like, well, if we schedule Kennesaw State, if we schedule Furman, if we schedule this school, that's all we're going to do. Those 3 or 4 non-conference slots are just going to be filled up with patsies, and nobody wants that. That's, right. I think, the point I'm trying to make. Nobody wants that. And I know the fan is kind of the last person that is being thought about in today's day and age of college football, but I don't know, man. Fans watch television. Television generates revenue. You would think that all of that goes together.
It's more, you bring up an interesting point in that we've never really had a playoff. It's always been an invitational.
Correct.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So in the sense that if you make it an auto bid system where almost everything is auto bid and the committee is minimized, then it is much more of a playoff. And you
Right.
know what you have to do. And you make the point
Yep.
that if it's a beauty contest, no one's going to play tough out of conference games.
And that's how college football has been for years. It's been for years. Hey, who have you beaten? How good is your resume? Number 2 in the country. How good is their resume compared to number 4 in the country? Whenever I kind of think about this and the SEC trying to, maybe politic their way in. Do you remember back in, I think it was 2004? Remember when Auburn went undefeated and was held out of the national championship game?
Because the SEC was considered an inferior league.
I think about that often, kind of when these things are brought up, and I'm like, can you imagine if and that was a decent Auburn team. Remember, you had Ronnie Brown, Cadillac Williams, Jason Catholic quarterback. It was a pretty solid team. But man, can you imagine if that would happen now? Like if we had, I know we don't anymore, but like a 4-team model, where you had an undefeated SEC team, the world would explode. Mm-hmm. I mean.
Because we've all lived through 18 years of ESPN propaganda.
Right. Yeah.
But it was okay to do that to Florida State though a couple years ago. Leave that.
I know that's
them out.
A great example. That's a great example of everything. But I hope that I'm very curious to see how this is all going to go, because I think they gotta come up with something by like August. I'm not exactly sure the date when things have to be decided by, but. It's crazy how much Greg Sankey is going on the offensive, being in public, going on Dan Patrick. I think he talked to maybe Paul Feinbaum a little bit. I'm sure they're best buds, but it's just he's very out in the open. Tony Petitti is not very out in the open. Like if you've noticed him during his time as commissioner of the conference, he'll do his stuff at media days. He'll do his stuff, I'm sure, like on a conference championship weekend, but he does not do very many interviews. Okay. Like that's how these guys are very different. I would imagine that Tony is, I think he would imagine that he speaks up a little bit more behind closed doors, whereas Greg Sankey is a little bit more out in the open. So they're very different that way. And I think like the Big Ten, they're in a position of confidence right now that this year that just happened last year. And I think, the West Coast editions have been certainly positive for them this year. And I think the SEC is in a situation where their power that they've had, well-earned power, okay, with all of those championships. And now it's but that's the thing. It's a different world now. Yes. And I think a lot of the money lies in the North. And you guys have probably talked about that.
Yep.
I've talked about that. Look at some of these booster collections that exist at a place like Michigan, right? And some of the alumni, right? The Bryce Underwood recruitment is a great example of that and the money that was put up. Look what's happening in Eugene at Oregon, and look what they've had for a long period of time. Look what happened. Look what is happening at USC right now. They're finally getting their NIL together and getting some great guys on campus. Like that's just. Penn State is putting a lot more money into facilities, into stadium, and to become a complete athletic department, especially with football. Like there's a lot of money, and maybe there's not as much in the South. So now the SEC is trying to they see the dynamic and how it's changing. Now maybe, the money that was kind of stuffed in a McDonald's bag under the table certainly it's not as attractive, that much money compared to some of the money above the table that's certainly being flown around now with some of these collectives up north.
Yeah, let me cut in and just say we would be remiss if we didn't say that Greg Sankey is the proverbial man behind the curtain, demanding everybody ignore the evidence of their eyes in favor of this myth of SEC superiority. That argument doesn't work anymore, and we have to say why every time. The Big Ten has won the last 2 national titles. They haven't lost in the playoff to an SEC team in those last 2 years. In the postseason as a whole, the Big Ten went 5-1 against the SEC. And if Iowa could hold a lead, it would have been 6-0.
Oh, that one hurt. That one, I remember watching that game and seeing it slowly slip away against Missouri. In that bowl
we
game.
were that close to being undefeated against the SEC.
But they'll come back and say bowl games don't matter. But here's the thing.
They all already have,
Here's the thing that I see, and I try to follow this it's really hard to follow opt-outs. Like that is one of the toughest things to do covering college football.
But Alabama didn't opt out. South Carolina didn't opt out.
Well,
Michigan did.
you look at the players that opted out of that game, like Michigan
That's what
versus
I'm
Alabama
saying.
is a great example.
Yeah.
A good amount of players were not on the field for Alabama, as well as Michigan. And you're talking about Michigan was a 7-5 team, and Bama was supposedly a college football playoff team. And then you saw the result that you saw, where Michigan somehow found a way to win. Illinois against South. Like, the thing I think a lot of people, a team that loses in a bowl game, that's not a playoff game, will almost always blame it on opt-outs. But a lot of times throughout a lot of these bowl games, there's a lot of opt-outs on every team.
Yeah, exactly.
So sometimes it depends how much, the talent of players that opt out. But if we're talking about sheer numbers, there's usually not that much of a difference when you're kind of factoring in some of these teams as well. So that's why I think, at first, maybe these last couple of years ago, where I'm like, I don't know how much bowl success should really be played compared to previous years. But now I think maybe it's a little bit more even, maybe unfortunately opt-outs are becoming more mainstream. So now maybe things are a little bit on a level playing field with certain, you don't have a team with like 15 opt-outs and a team with 2. I mean, maybe you will, but most of the time they're pretty even.
Yeah, and the fact that it's even is why I hate that argument, because what you're saying is depth of talent and coaching and program buy-in don't matter.
Right.
Because you have depth and they're coached up. You see that in the bowl game. I look at last year, everyone's like, oh, Virginia Tech had a bunch of opt-outs. Minnesota had a bunch of opt-outs. The Gophers showed up and whipped them, more or less. Had a big bowl season doing that. And so it's the opt-out. I just don't buy the argument because, again, you made the perfect point. The opt-outs are happening pretty equally both ways. So we're still playing football here. To me, that still matters. But even if you limit it to playoff games, the Big Ten's been dominant.
I know. We'll
take that out.
3 of the last 4 national championship participants are current Big Ten members. You can go back to Washington, of course, when they were in their final year in the Pac-12 conference, of course. And remember, like that year, which, as I said, was kind of the last year of the Pac-12 and, almost because it was the last year of the 14 playoff last year of that conference. And then the next year was going to be very different. You had 2 future Big Ten SEC members. Washington was able to hold off and beat Texas. And then you had Michigan was able to beat Alabama. So that was kind of, at that point, was kind of a little bit of a test to see which conference was going to go which way. And then you had what you had. And it's crazy to me. Another thing that's kind of worth mentioning, I think, is, the one participant out of 4 these past 2 years that wasn't a Big Ten team was a team that should be a Big Ten team in Notre Dame. You look at that. If you want to call it Northern supremacy, whatever you want to call it, it's just the way it is.
That's a different podcast, Ted. I think they have a sword.
That's a big bag of worms there, certainly.
Yeah, no, you make a great point, and the fact that I was gonna go on a rant too, but you did it, so I applaud it. And it's like, the SEC wants to pretend like it's 10 years ago when Bagman dominated recruiting and Jim Bob from south of the Mason-Dixon line having a few of those in each fan base was enough to get the job done. But, they have the Big Ten schools have these giant alumni bases. And I wouldn't say it's not even just the top schools. I look at even Minnesota Dinkytown Athletes has thousands of members. Now it might not have a bunch of whales, but you don't necessarily always need all the whales if you've got a lot of buy-in. And you look at outside of Purdue and Maryland, you don't see Big Ten teams getting rated in the transfer portal anymore. Because they have the money to keep their guys.
Well, Purdue is an interesting example because, they're like, look what they do on the basketball side. That's, I think we'll maybe talk about this with the House settlement here in a little bit. It's all about kind of where you want to spend your money. Like Purdue and Maryland are actually 2 pretty good basketball teams, Big Ten wise. So maybe that's kind of something that they want to invest in as well. But you kind of see, you mentioned, of course, with the Minnesota example, is a lot of these Big Ten fan bases are very large. A lot of these Big Ten fan bases have a lot of certainly a lot of support and a lot of money kind of flowing in their way. So it's really shouldn't be ultra surprising that things have kind of played out the way they have, I guess, as of right now. But it's going to be very interesting to see how this postseason thing eventually is decided. If Greg and Tony can get back on the same page, behind closed doors, if Tony can be like, dude, you don't leave money on the table when it's on the table for your conference. It's sitting right there. Like that's, I mean, I know I already.
And you don't get to run 90 meters while we want to run 100.
It doesn't.
You don't get to do that. That's not fair.
It's such a great opportunity with this, the auto bids and everything. It's such a great opportunity for college football to try is the key word there. Try to get on the same page and as much on a level playing field as we can. Look, I know conference realignment has really skewed things towards the Big Ten and the SEC, the consolidation of all of the top and elite brands into two conferences, but gotta find a way. Find a way to kind of make this thing as even as possible. I don't know. That's the thing that's always bothered me about college football is the politics of it. Is the politics of whether it's a team, whether it's a conference, whether whoever it is there's nobody in charge. Someone can always kind of use their influence to get what they want. And I always thought that college football lacked from a central governing body, but maybe this House settlement is going to try to get us close-ish maybe to that. So that's a whole nother thing. Boy,
close to college football commissioner, Big Ten Ted.
Boy,
I'd vote for you.
Thank you. I know everybody's out there nationally trying to, I should be the commissioner. I'm like, dude, it's not going to be any of you, but that's fine.
No. So they're wish casting.
I know.
Right.
All
right. Well, we went pretty deep in that rabbit hole, so we can move on. But yeah, the SEC wants to cheat by not playing enough conference games. To me, you can't even consider 5+11 unless the SEC goes to 9. You can't even consider it. It's got to be a no that's dead on arrival. That's the only way that's even an option. But, Ted, you're kind of convincing me on the air that the auto bids are maybe the way to go. I've never really gone down the path because they did seem so viscerally abhorrent to me. But it does make a lot of sense. It does take out a lot of the polling bias, and it's why the SEC probably has turned against it.
I've said that I got to look back on when I did that video. It was at least a couple of months ago where I'm like, what I want is competitive football. And this provides competitive football. Like I said before, non-conference and the postseason and all of that. What I would love to see is to mention no committee at all. We know the AP poll has maybe a little bit of slant in it and the coaches poll and all that, but why not throw in AP poll, coaches poll, put in F+, put in maybe not SP+, but
not anymore. Not anymore.
Right. Yeah. Put in as many metrics as you can that, that we think are fairly down, as much down the middle as we can possibly get.
Yeah. So not FPI.
Yeah. Right. Computers, whatever. Say you have 9 or 10 of them. Put them into the oven, so to speak, bake them together, and then it spits out a number that we feel is fairly close. That's almost what I would like to see is eliminate humans altogether. If you want to rank teams like that, that it's just, the less people we can have is going to be better for everybody.
No, that's probably better than my suggestion, which was to take all the committee members and seal them up on Labor Day weekend in like the NBA bubble, and they have to say goodbye to their families, no internet, no polls, just watching ball for a month, and then they can come out and tell us what they think.
Oh boy, that'd be something. That would be something. They got to relax a little. You remember last year the viral shot of them just sitting back and just being all, they gotta chill out a little bit in some of these meetings. They gotta kind of open up a little bit, but that's a whole nother discussion.
For sure. All right, should we talk briefly about this House settlement before
Let's
we get
do
into the Badgers? All right, so we aren't going to go too in depth on this, especially because the last segment went a little long in a good way. So House settlement, the days of players being paid from actual revenue are finally here. I'd say they're more than a generation overdue, but schools have roughly, I think it's $20.5 million or $20 million, something like that, annually to disperse to all their athletes. The lion's share will go to football at most schools. There will immediately, I think, be lawsuits over the legality of this settlement. I think it's going to be up in the air for a while. I don't think we're going to get anything. And my initial thought is, I just can't believe they're going to get away with having a salary cap without having collective bargaining rights.
Well, There's a lot of ways to go with this. I think the first thing that really stood out to me is this NIL clearinghouse.
Yes.
Because that is like, I look at it and basically, you have any deal over $600 has to be vetted through this clearinghouse and has to be approved by this clearinghouse. And they take a lot of factors in play, whether it's size of the market or, like success of the program or overall reach of the program as well. Cause there's some big schools that aren't in, big cities or anything like that. So I think that needs to be like, they're all taking this into consideration. I'm like, this isn't legal.
No,
you can't if
way.
I want to sign, if Aaron, let's put it in a professional standpoint. If Pat Mahomes wants to do a deal with State Farm, he doesn't have to run it through some subsidiary of the NFL, that's just, you can't do that. That is illegal. Now, I think this is a start.
Thank you.
Okay.
Because people think it's going to go away. And I just keep telling them there's no way it's legal. There's no way it's holding up.
So there will be lawsuits.
The players have seen promised land and they are not letting go of NIL.
There will be lawsuits as it pertains to the NIL Go portion of this. And then when that happens, and what happens next, I think is where things certainly land right now. Because right now it's like, okay, it's nice that you have a salary cap in place, but it's not really a salary cap because you have NIL certainly on top of it right now. So I'm not sure exactly where this thing is going to go. There's a lot of other people that are kind of going down a lot of different rabbit holes of where we could eventually get with this thing. But I think one thing to keep in mind here is like, because of Title IX and because of a lot of these other, legislation and everything, I could possibly see schools and teams being like, well, as long as we're a university, as long as we're kind of associated with this, as long as we're associated with all of the other athletic programs on our campus, there's going to be limitations of what we can do. So one kind of idea that's been brought up is each football program creates an LLC for their team. So now they can kind of be on their own in a different sort of league. Now, the term Super League certainly comes out. It doesn't have to be a 40, 50, 60 team league. It doesn't have to be something like that. It's just, within kind of the structure as it stands right now, you separate with football only because they make so much more revenue than everybody else. So they should be able to make their own rules. Like you shouldn't have the same. So you shouldn't have football diving into that same pool of money as rowing, as swimming, as tennis, as, some of these other programs. So
maybe men's hoops. Maybe you can throw men's hoops in with
right.
them.
Yeah. I could see that, but I think that's eventually where we're going to go is eventually I think we're going to see football somehow on its own. Don't know what exactly that means, but I think that's where we're getting. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see exactly how this is all, because this is happening like right now. Yep. And in the college football calendar, we are in the midst of official visit season and recruiting season on campus. So this is something that in the maybe biggest recruiting month of the year that schools and coaches and teams have to adjust to right now. And they don't know if something's going to get, if there's going to be a suit down the road. It's very short term and how everything is being approached right now. But yeah, it's the step in the right direction, but I still think we got a lot more steps.
I would imagine that antacid purchases are way up in college towns. I just think that's probably going on. All right, John, do you have any thoughts on that before we move on?
No, I guess like when it comes to all of this, I really like, and to kind of go back to the 5+11 and all the college football playoff talk, what I'm hoping is on behalf of the Big Ten, as quiet as we've seen or not seen, I guess, of Petiti, I hope he's basically showing, through this and through the House settlement, that he's kind of approaching with that mentality of, speak softly and carry a big stick. Mm-hmm. I hope that there is definitely some toughness and some lines being drawn that we just can't see, and that he's going to be, standing up for, what's best for the conference, which I believe he will. I do think that he is absolutely qualified and good enough leader to be doing that. It is just a little unnerving, I guess, when you see someone like Greg Sankey out there who is, carrying the torch and being seen in public. Even just today, he was seen with President Trump and Pete Bavacqua out golfing. And he's getting it out there. And so therefore that narrative that ESPN has been pushing on us for the last 20 plus years of their superiority, he's continuing to perpetuate that. And so I'm hoping that in some other kind of way, maybe I know someone posted something on Twitter just a couple days ago. Gosh, why am I just forgetting who it was? Shoot, I apologize to whoever to who it was. But anyway, the thought was with Tony Petitti dealing with a lot of these TV execs, he's used to dealing with things more behind the scenes and kind of Machiavellian type of situations. So I think that he's handling this in that way. So I want to have faith that he may not be publicly he may publicly be looking like he might be a little weaker than what he truly is, but he's really good at working in the shadows, and he's definitely making sure that we're going to be in a good spot. Because as much as I think the narrative is that the Big Ten is weaker still than the SEC, I just don't believe that to be true anymore. I think that
it's just like the Civil War. We have the money and the infrastructure.
Yes. So
let's be real.
Yeah,
I love it.
Those are my thoughts. That's really all kind of encompassing both of those subjects.
Yeah.
I really just I'm hoping for that. I would love to hear something though, public. Something, just a little statement would be nice.
Yes, for sure. I agree with you. And Sankey's coming from academia, where you have to swing your proverbial dick all over the place to get people's attention. So he's used to doing it. All right, now let's get to the theme of Ted's shirt and talk about the Wisconsin Badgers. I'm excited to preview the Badgers this year, and let's just talk. We just got to talk about briefly under Paul Chryst, Wisconsin went on a tear, winning 9 or more games almost every year, other than going 8-5 once in 2018 and 4-3 during COVID. That's a remarkable pace. He picked up where Gary Anderson left off. He picked up where Brett Bielema left off. He picked up where Barry Alvarez left off, as you kind of talked about it earlier. So I'm not going to lie, Ted, when the Fickle, I was celebrating an Axe win, right? I was so excited, and I didn't even get 24 hours to celebrate the Axe win before the news came out that Wisconsin, and I was at that year, I was at the game, the Michigan-Ohio State game with a buddy of mine, friend of the pod, Phil, and not even 24 hours in, they announced Luke Fickell, and I immediately, John, went and I texted you and was like, you have got to be kidding me. Because Fickell was the coach everybody wanted. He was the coach of the cycle. He took Cincinnati, which at that point was just a group of 5 school, to a 4-team college football playoff. And I thought to myself, man, if he could do that at Cincinnati, imagine what he's going to do with the resources available at a Big Ten school in Madison. And maybe he still will, right? But it hasn't gone on as planned the first 2 years. Fickell finished his first year 7-6, then regressed to 5-7 last year, causing Wisconsin to miss a bowl for the first time in over 20 years. His schematic changes on both sides of the ball have garnered subpar results to this point, to the point that Fickell fired former OC Phil Longo and is abandoning the air raid, going back to a power running scheme this year. So that said, it's not all doom and gloom. Fickell has recruited really well. And a lot of people think he can start to turn things around this fall, and the recruiting is going to show up. So I just got to ask Ted, Luke Fickell thoughts. How are your thoughts on how things have gone so far? And like, what is the hope that this is the year things turn around?
I guess reaction on how things have gone so far. It's tough because at the end of Paul Chryst, that was really, you were starting to see a lot of this NIL stuff kind of come into play. You were starting to see a lot of this portal stuff come into play. And how do I put this nicely? Paul Chryst was not about that. It was very clear, kind of based on the timeline that you laid out, that it's like, well, once this kind of stuff started to become a little bit more mainstream is maybe when you started to see certainly the drop off a little bit more. Now, when we kind of go and we talk about Luke, I agree with you that he was the guy. Like, I'm a little bit biased in this whole situation because my dad went to high school with Jim Leonard's dad, of course, the longtime defensive coordinator,
whom we thought was going to be named Wisconsin head coach. I was prepared for it.
he was the interim head coach.
Yes.
And it was an opportunity there at post Paul Chryst to really like, all right, Jimmy, now is your time to really prove what I think he wanted this entire time. Because he turned down the Green Bay Packers for a defensive coordinator job there at one time as well. But it was a tough, first of all, it was a tough situation for Jimmy at that point in time. And then it was hit or miss. It wasn't all, sometimes you see these interim head coaches. Recently, David Braun is a great example of that over at Northwestern, where you see like, oh man, they clearly right away, they clearly saw things jump up when you got a new voice in the room. Now, of course, Jim, of course, was there for that period of time, and it just didn't hit enough, I think, for Chris McIntosh, certainly at that point. But Luke was like, whoa, and all of a sudden it kind of made me, I'm like, all right, that's good. Chris McIntosh means business. He wants to get Wisconsin back to winning 9 games a year, to winning 10 games a year, to be in that type of discussion. And that's the type of aggressiveness you need to have if you're not Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, USC, etc. If you're not a program that can kind of shell out that kind of money for a head coach. So I'm like, all right. And it wasn't just that coaching cycle. Like Luke Fickell, for a couple of years, I think was very highly thought of and very like, hey, will he go to this job? He did, and he stayed at Cincinnati. Will he go to that job? No, he didn't. And he stayed at Cincinnati. So far, I think no doubt it's been a disappointment. I wasn't expecting them to win. Well, I did predict them to win 9 games his first year, so maybe I should backtrack on that. But that's maybe more of I was seeing it through red-colored glasses there at that point. But I think
to be fair, you had been doing nothing but winning that many games.
I know.
Why wouldn't you?
That was kind of a big thing, and I think like offensively, all right, you go with Phil Longo, which now we can see it was a terrible disaster. But at the point I was kind of conflicted. And I'm like, well, Wisconsin they've been making their money for years, running the football, great offensive lines, average quarterback play. We know the drill. And be like, well, and he's like, well, they're going to bring in Phil Longo, modernize the offense, maybe a little bit. And I'm like, I don't love getting away from what the Badgers have done well for so many years, but maybe modernizing things a little bit, maybe that will help. It did not help, obviously. I think like these past couple of years proved that Wisconsin is going to be successful doing what they did in 1991, 1992, 1998, 1999, 2006, all of these years all along. Some schools can just recruit and develop to certain styles. Look what happened when Michigan hired Rich Rodriguez. Okay. Michigan has been a very type of physical run the ball type of program. When they've had success, that's been their mantra. Look what happened when they're winning 3 straight Big Ten titles and a national championship in there as well. Other schools like, you can't imagine a school like Texas Tech ground and pounding. When you think Texas Tech throughout history, throughout different head coaches, you think they're putting the ball in the air, whether it was Graham Harrell, whether it was Patrick Mahomes, whoever it was, like that's what you think of. It's just like Wisconsin, I don't think was ever going to be able to recruit great air raid quarterbacks. You need a lot of talented wide receivers. That's just not, I don't think, who Wisconsin is. So now with Jeff Grimes coming in, they're getting back to a little bit more ground and pound. I always kind of getting back to Jim Leonhard, I thought if they were going to hire Jimmy, they were going to hire an offensive coordinator along with him that could maybe get a little bit of boost to the offense, but still maintain the identity. And the identity was the big part the last 2 years. There was zero identity. When you watch, we've talked about it many times already. When you watch Wisconsin football, you know what you're going to get. You're going to get farm boys up front. You're going to get great running back play. Pretty good play at the tight end position. Like I said, outside of Russell Wilson, average quarterback play. You do what you need to do. Your wide receiver, you might get some good ones. All conference receivers every now and then, something like that. But it was built on the physicality. It was built on the defense. And some of these personnel decisions have really been questionable in the first 2 years of Luke Fickell. The hope is now that things are kind of coming back. And it's crazy that throughout these first couple of years, when Wisconsin has had success, it's been when they run the football. Like that's the thing. I maybe think of maybe last year against Purdue, They aired it out a little bit more. I think Tretch had a huge game in that game, but really, like, that's what's crazy to me. They're still recruiting throughout these last 2 years when Longo was the offensive coordinator. They're still recruiting 4-star running backs. They're still recruiting 4-star offensive linemen. You look at some of these classes, I'm like, those are still the guys that come to Wisconsin, which kind of leads me back to some schools are just built a certain way, and that's just how they are, right? That's just how it all kind of comes together. Right? No matter which era you're at, it seems like a school like USC gets good quarterbacks. Oregon gets really fast players at their school, no matter who the coach is. And that's kind of the case with Wisconsin as it currently sits right now. So, yeah, has it been a disappointment? Have some of these decisions and hires been questionable? Yes, absolutely. Is this year's schedule an absolute murder show? Yes, it is. Like, it's a very complicated season. I think, because year 3 at this point, I think Wisconsin fans might have been saying, yeah, Luke needs to get to 8 wins. Maybe he needs to get to 9 wins, get back to that Wisconsin expectations. But that's everything needs to go right for them to win 8 games this year. Okay. Yeah. Like they need to get to 9. They need to have everything go right. Plus they need an upset. Right. Yeah. So that's kind of how it stands right now.
We will get to the schedule game, and when we play that, we'll talk more about that. Let me just quick say, Jeff Grimes cut his teeth as an O-line coach, which seems, for what Wisconsin's trying to do, seems like it makes sense. BYU, Colorado, Auburn, Va-Tech, and LSU before becoming BYU's OC in 2018. Grimes had really good success developing Zach Wilson, who had a season for the ages during the COVID year. So that's really good. He was a finalist for the Broyles Award there. He was a finalist again his first year at Baylor. Then things kind of went sideways a little bit at Baylor. And then he spent last year as Kansas's OC, which is, awesome because he got to work with Lance Leipold. And I'm sure that probably added to his bag of tricks a little bit. Yep. When I look at him, that's pretty cool. So, I know we kind of talked already about schematically what you expect. We're going to pound the ball. It's Jeff Grimes. He wants to run that wide zone and play action passes, and that's kind of his wheelhouse. What do you think of him as a personality and kind of is with his, what do you like? Is there anything that jumps out at the time he's been coached, like his energy? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I've kind of seen some posts on social media that they want to get back to nasty football. They want to get back to dominating the ground game again, and they haven't made that a secret, right? That's what this regime and what this system with Grimes as the OC certainly wants to do. And it's not going to be, I think we need to make one thing clear. We're not going to be lining up an I formation every play like it's the 90s. Okay. We're not going to be running
it's modern football. Yeah.
It is the modern version of what Wisconsin probably should be. So it's interesting when Grimes got hired. I was kind of scrolling through the Twitter sphere and what Kansas fans were actually like, oh, great. Our offensive coordinator is leaving. And that kind of gave me a little bit of like, oh, okay, maybe this guy, isn't maybe what we're looking for. You would want the team that he's leaving to maybe be a little bit bummed out.
But they were still thinking about Kotelnicki. That's hard to get over.
Yeah, I know. That's and we know how long that Leipold and Kotelnicki were together and what type of relationship that certainly had there. But Kansas put up some really good production. Devin Neal, their running back, I think was 1,000 yards back-to-back years, if I remember correctly, or close to it, maybe a second year. I can't exactly remember off the top of my head. But I think when I watched Kansas last year a little bit, and then I kind of look at the roster this year, and I'm like, okay, this can work. This can work. Because I think there are a few things to get excited about as it pertains to Wisconsin's passing game this upcoming season, but it's got to be that balance. It's got to start with the run game. That's where it's got to start, I think, for Wisconsin. And you need to establish something. I think maybe you guys have talked about this on your show before. You got to have something, and you got to stick with it. Yeah. That was the problem with Phil. Like 1 week, they'd be running the ball, and they'd have a ton of success. Gee, wonder if that's ever happened in this state before. And then another week, they'd come out, and they'd be throwing the ball, and they'd be like, and it's just like, no, you gotta pick one, and you gotta figure out who you are. Like it didn't seem like there was ever going to be a future with Phil Longo, right? It didn't ever seem, okay, this is what we're doing. This is what we're going to recruit to, and then we're going to go off from there. Like that, it just never seemed like that ever really leveled out. Now maybe getting this, it kind of really blends with how the Badgers have been recruiting over these last couple of cycles. So I think the hope is there, but there's a lot of pressure. Like if this team goes 5-7 and 5-7 is on the table, if they don't make a bowl game after making a bowl game for 20 plus consecutive years, despite the schedule, what happens? So yeah, there is pressure on this team to produce. I know a first year OC, new scheme, that can be a little bit, sometimes that can be a little bit dicey. So we'll see how fast they get off the ground here.
Awesome. Well, let's talk right about personnel then. At QB, I was struck. Wisconsin brought in 2 capable quarterbacks in the portal. They got Danny O'Neal from San Diego State, looks like the backup, while former Maryland Terrapins QB Billy Edwards takes over the starting gig. Edwards has obvious talent. His performance had its ups and downs, but he's got obvious talent. He threw for nearly 2,900 yards, 65% completions, with his rock solid. He only threw for 6.9 yards per attempt, and he did take 17 sacks, which isn't ideal. He also had 15 TDs to 9 picks. So ideally, you'd want a little better TD interception ratio this fall. But to be fair, Maryland had a terrible offensive line that couldn't block at all. So he was running for his life a lot. That said, they had some really nice wide receivers in Prather and Felton. So Mike Locksley raised a few eyebrows this spring when he strongly implied that at least one player on the team last year was chasing a bag rather than focusing on the task at hand. And if you believe the rumors, that was a shot at Billy Edwards. So Edwards left. And the question now is, who was the problem? Maryland or Edwards? And do we see a more consistent version of Billy Edwards this fall? So I'm curious what you think about Billy Edwards and also Danny O'Neal. So you have with a little better depth than I think, obviously, when you had Braden Locke as the backup.
Yeah, I think they brought in 2 portal quarterbacks to be like, hey, dude, if a guy gets hurt, like it's happened with Mordecai and Van Dyke, we need somebody else. Because that's like, man, you talk about the problems of
bad luck.
Like, man,
really bad luck.
Who knows what happens if they keep their quarterbacks healthy, you know, throughout those last couple of seasons. As well, the Badgers played in a couple of tight games last year with Braden Locke. Who knows if Tyler Van Dyke is the quarterback, against Oregon? Who knows how that one pans out? Penn State, who knows how that game certainly pans out? Closer games against good teams, certainly. But yeah, I think the insurance policy a little bit there with Danny O'Neal. Billy, I think Billy, he showed some flashes. He showed some highs. He certainly showed some lows. I'm sure you guys know about that in that game against Minnesota, where he certainly turned the football over a lot in that specific game. But
we had a good time that day. Yeah.
I think the thing with Billy is there's considering what we just talked about with the offensive scheme is there's not going to be as much pressure on him as maybe there was at Maryland. You look at Maryland, whether it was with Taulia Tagovailoa, that's more of a pass first type of offense. Okay. There's a little bit more pressure to maybe distribute the football first and more often in that stance. Like Wisconsin, if they get kind of down to that run first type of offense, I think things are going to be more comfortable, certainly for Billy within this offense as well. And maybe we'll talk about here in a minute, some of the weapons out there could be pretty solid as well for Billy. So I think, like, considering what this year was, with the offensive coordinator change and, what you had from a recruiting standpoint, you obviously, I don't love going into his third year and it's another portal quarterback and there's not really a great sign. And they got Carter Smith, who's a 4-star true freshman. He's a little bit more mobile, but he's got a lot of development, I think, to do. Like it wasn't really a super promising future at the quarterback position. So I think it's a solid option, I think, for this season. If they can maybe play to their strengths, hopefully in the run game this year, then he can certainly work off that play action and he can certainly have better matchups, easier reads to certainly make. And that maybe limits the type of turnover heavy game that Billy had against Minnesota last season.
Yeah, no, those are really good points. Let's since you mentioned, let's move on. Let's go to running back. I think since that's going to be the focal point of the offense. Let's talk about them.
Yep.
It seems like it's going to go as far as Dylan Jones and Darian Dupree can take. The Badgers will go as far as they can take them. I just got to ask, what are your expectations for those guys? How would you compare them to maybe Badger star running backs that have come before? And where would you rank them on a scale from like average starting Big Ten running back to superstar?
Well, this is interesting because both of these guys, Darian Dupree and Dylan Jones, came out of the same recruiting class. They were both true freshmen last season. And Darian Dupree got a lot more run than Dylan Jones last season earlier in his career. And I almost thought, maybe it's kind of maybe based on their skill sets a little bit, but I thought maybe it was the other. When I looked at high school tape, I thought Dylan Jones popped a little bit more than Darian Dupree personally. So that was, if Dylan can kind of, what he was in high school, if he can kind of be that type of guy his sophomore year, considering, and then what you saw some good things from Darian, I think that I'm looking for that to be a really good 1-2 combo. And then you look at someone like Cade Yakamele, who's kind of a little bit of a smaller guy, but still he's very quick. He's very quick, certainly as well. So I think the hope is that Wisconsin can have those 2 4-star running backs in Dupree and Jones be a complement of each other this season. That, I think, is the hope. Look, do I think either one of these guys is going to be in that upper echelon of Wisconsin running backs? There's still maybe a long way to go to maybe get to that point. We're dealing with high expectations, I think, there. But I think what Wisconsin, I think, is looking for is that to be a really good 1-2 type of combination in the run game. And they've got 3 returning starters on the offensive line, even though a projected offensive line starter at left tackle looks like he's injured and out for the season. This is still a veteran offensive line, which we know that's where Wisconsin's success has really started in the past. So I have confidence, but these guys are still young. Even though Dupree got some run last year, he's still just a sophomore, really coming into his first year starting. Dylan Jones, he redshirted last year, so that kind of tells you, you maybe how much he didn't get on the field last season. But I think Dylan can be I think he can be an explosive running back. I really do. So I'm looking at the combination, maybe instead of maybe one guy really rising above the rest. But I think there's good depth. I think there's good depth in this room with Yakamele, who we also saw last season. It's like they have to be good because all of a sudden what we kind of talked about with your previous questions, like, well, what happens if they can't run the football? What happens if these guys can't really? Because now the pressure gets put onto Billy Edwards. Now you kind of see like what you did at Maryland. You can get highs, you can get lows. They only won 1 Big Ten game last season. So I think what they want Billy to be more steady. And I think for Billy to be more steady, these guys, these young running backs need to step up and maybe start to realize some of their expectations running behind a more veteran offensive line.
Yeah, I think it's just, for me, what's so odd as a Minnesota fan, and I'm sure, it's definitely hitting you as a Wisconsin fan, is we are so used to knowing exactly who that next superstar running back is going to be. Like they're just, it was just every time someone left, it was like, oh, but it's this guy next, and it's this guy next, and it was just.
I remember when I first heard about Jonathan Taylor, and I was already upset, and I'd never seen him.
yeah,
I'd never seen him, and I was already mad.
So it's odd that and I'm these guys, I've heard wonderful things, I've heard great things in the offseason and a lot of high expectations, but I'm not hearing the confidence that you were used to hearing for decades, I guess at this point. So that's just a different take and odd. I mean, and not to say they can't find success. It's just, I'm used to hearing about some next up and coming superstar and being proven they were right, so it's just
like you feel good. I don't know. It's just like, I don't know how you want to feel great, but I think maybe kind of what we've seen, certain, like everything, like if you're operating from an older Wisconsin mindset, it makes sense. All right, 3 returning offensive starters, 2 young running backs, plug them in, let them run crazy. It makes sense. But when you're kind of switching things back, what is like this version of a Wisconsin going to look like? Like, I think that's I think the thing we're just not absolutely sure about. But I honestly think that there is potential for both of these guys to really, it can be a breakout combination. I really do. And Wisconsin can, I think they can, we'll talk about the schedule, I'm sure later, but Wisconsin can achieve success if these guys really step up into a big role and this offensive line really comes together. I really believe that. I'm just like, but in previous years, I'm like, yeah, it's going to happen. This year, I think like this whole Luke Fickell thing has taught us, don't like expect anything. Don't think anything is like a sure thing because it's not. And now you're kind of flipping back. Yeah, Wisconsin had success in the run. When they had success in these first couple of years, it had been when they're running the football. So in theory, that's the way it should go. But now where it's maybe their point A of their offense, we'll see exactly what these guys can do with expectations. So it's going to be interesting because as the run game goes, this Badger offense certainly will most likely go.
Yeah. And I mean, it is, when you have that pair of freshman backs, that's exciting though, because they come back and they can make a big jump. I remember when we had Rodney Smith and Shannon Brooks, and those guys flashed as Frosh, and then by their sophomore years, they were finished products pretty much. Once that running back gets 1 year in an S&C program and the weight room and the explosion, and like you see guys kind of max out their athleticism, then also watch some film, you can see guys take a big jump. So that's really exciting for sure. All right, let's move on and talk about the wide receivers and tight ends. Sure. I wanted to save the O-line for last because that's Jeff Grimes' little baby. But so we've got Ohio State transfer Jaden Ballard. We've got returners Vinny Anthony, Tresh Kekahuna at wide receiver. At tight end, we've got Tucker Ashcraft, Lance Mason, some more experienced players. What are your, it's no secret that the wide receiver play has been somewhat underwhelming in recent years in Madison. They were expected to step up in Phil Longo's scheme and, had some drops, had some issues getting open, stuff like that. Do you see that improving this year, and maybe Wisconsin with less pressure on the wide receivers, maybe it'll be easier for them to produce because you'll have 8 guys in the box on defense?
That's kind of the way that's in theory, the way I see it. You needed more depth in the air raid. You need like at minimum 4 like really good wide receivers. You need just a lot more good bodies in there. Now you look at this, the way that this Wisconsin team I think is shaping out. You don't need as many bodies consistently across every single play during the season. So when you kind of look at this, group, Vinny Anthony is a speed guy. He can certainly get over the top. That's I think exciting. We've seen some really good flashes from Vinny. Now this is hopefully the year where he puts it all together as that deep threat, that guy that can maybe take the top off of the defense when you run. Oh, let's do it a couple more times. Run. I just get excited saying that continuously over and over. Bring back the fullback. But he's the guy is like now when everybody creeps towards the line of scrimmage, that's the guy that you want to take atop the defense. And then Tresh Kekahuna, once again, he had a lot of expectations when he came in to Madison. You can see like it was last year, I think Purdue, like you saw the big playability of him working out of the slot. So you got your X on the outside. You've got Tresh Kekahuna certainly in the slot. They had Tyrell Henry who came over from Michigan State, another guy that's certainly in that slot role as well. You mentioned Jaden Ballard. Jaden Ballard was a 4-star, I want to say top 150 overall type of guy coming out of high school, but he was a lot. Remember what was it? The receiver that went from Ohio State to Iowa. I'm forgetting his name already. But the Caleb Brown. Yeah. Caleb Brown. He was that type of guy, 4-star, top 100, top 150 type of kid. And then it's like, well, it's Ohio State's wide receiver room. If you're not just an absolute freakazoid, you're going to get left behind.
Oh yeah.
And I think the hope
polished,
is that
even if you've got the skills, if you're not polished, they're going to forget about you.
And I think the hope is that okay, Jaden Ballard was good, but he just wasn't good enough to be a top 3 or whatever wide receiver at Ohio State. Like if that's the type of guy that Wisconsin gets, that's another guy that you can land to. Now you've got Jaden Ballard on the outside, who's 6'2". You've got Vinny Anthony on the outside with a lot of speed. You've got Tresh Kekahuna coming out of the slot. Now you got weapons. And then you kind of, and I mentioned Tyrell Henry, Chris Brooks has been a guy that's been in the program. Joseph Griffin, a 6'4" wide receiver that transferred there from Boston College. I think it was the beginning of last season as well. Okay, now you're starting to plug in some of this depth. If those first three guys really come up and really step up to the occasion, now you create some balance. Now you run the football. Now the play action certainly has you some threats down the field. And now if Billy can get some more confidence midseason in the throw game, right? You get started with that. Now the run lane's open. Like it's football 101. It's balance, right? You got to take what the defense gives you. You don't want to be in such a position where one part of your offense, like when Braden Locke, he showed tiny flashes at times, but it was very clear. Like this was a Wisconsin offense that just they couldn't go to the pass game consistently that often. Right. And then they needed to obviously come back to the run game. The hope is with a veteran quarterback and these receivers is you can achieve some balance and keep some defenses off balance. They brought in, the tight end position is very interesting because they brought in Tanner Kojal. Ball State was all about him. And then they brought him in. And then that was in the what would that have been in the winter portal, and then in the spring portal, he transferred out to Houston. They had a wide receiver from Idaho and Mark Hamper, who did something very similarly as well. But I think it was very big that Wisconsin was going to get a tight end, and they got someone by the name of Lance Mason from Missouri State. He put up some big numbers. He was another like pass catching type of tight end. Like Tanner Kojal was as well. I think he was like an FCS All-American his last season as well. So it was very clear that this staff was like, we want a great pass catching tight end. So
you need one in a power running scheme.
You do. So I'm really glad that they have like Tucker Ashcraft, all due respect to the guy. Like, he's not a guy that you maybe want as a top pass catching tight end one type of guy in there. I think he's certainly got a role in this offense. And I think he really fits better into this tight end 2 type of role where he is going to exceed as a blocker at 260 pounds, maybe some goal line type of situations as well. And then in these normal situations, you have a 6'4", 240 pound Lance Mason in there that can certainly run around on the field as well. So that's the hope, I think, is what certainly ends up at the tight end position. I know the tight end, it's not exactly the number one priority in an air raid system, which once again, we get back to that. Now I think having the tight end back into this thing certainly brings back days of old when you had Owen Daniels running around, when you had Fumagalli running around, and you had some of these other tight ends that Wisconsin has that they've had over the years.
When you said Owen Daniels, my heart dropped into my stomach a little bit. I'm like kind of upset now. I'd forgotten about him. That was painful memories. All right. Let's move on to the offensive line.
Sure.
So 3 starters back, and I was saying including the starters at tackle and Riley Mahlman and Joe Brunner, but you said there was an injury?
Yeah, Kevin Haywood. Haywood was a 4-star guy that came out. Everybody's really excited about him. And, he was probably slated to be in there at left tackle this year, but he goes down. So they got to find a way to find somebody else over that left tackle. Like he was really slated to really step in and step up at that position. And now he's not there. So that's something that they've got to figure out. But I think there is certainly a lot of positivity on this offensive line here for Wisconsin, considering those 3 starters that you mentioned, especially Riley Mahlman over there at right tackle. So
that one hurts.
Yeah, so that's something that
the Minnesota kid for anybody who's wondering why I'm upset about it.
Absolutely. So that's once again, that's where it all starts. It starts on the interior, and they got to kind of lean on these 3 guys, and then whoever plugs those other 2 spots to be able to really roll in there. So if they can certainly get that group going, that's certainly going to help everybody out.
Okay, so what I had, at least based on my knowledge, that we had Heinsohn, Renfro, and Mandel on the inside. Does that sound right? Or what do you think? How do you think that shakes out?
Yeah, that sounds accurate. That sounds about accurate. It's still very up in the air as to how this is all going to play out outside of Brunner, outside of Renfro, outside of Riley Mollman. I don't know how much clarity that spring really provided all of that. So it's going to be very, and I think like that's the problem, is that Kevin Haywood on an ACL tear, that injury was man, that was tough, because I think he was like in the 2 deep last year as a true freshman. There was a lot of excitement of him coming out of Pennsylvania, be like, all right, he's going to take some time, maybe as a backup if we really need him, type of deal. All right, that's what's going to happen, and then he's going to rise up into a starting role. And
very difficult to be in the 2 deep as a true frosh on the O-line.
It is
very difficult. You have to be a special talent.
Yeah, it's very difficult. And then that was the natural progression of what the thought was. And now that's not there. So they got to try to find a way. They've got to try to find a way to figure it out. I think there's a lot of guys, a couple of which that you mentioned, are certainly in that role. But I think that's going to be one of the main priorities of this staff for fall camp. We got to figure out, specifically left tackle. You got to figure out left tackle. Mm-hmm. And you got to have that solidified, because you mentioned the pressure that Billy Edwards was on last year. Got to have that solidified. Offensive line, of course, going to be a huge key to the Badgers' success.
Absolutely. And then what do you think about the offensive line depth? Is there some you feel good about, or is it young, or where is it at?
It's younger. You've got a decent amount of redshirt freshmen on this team. Emerson Mandel is a guy that you talked about. Colin Cubberly, Ryan Corey. They're all redshirt freshmen, certainly right now. So this was like Badgers up front. They brought in some transfer, like Renfro came over from Cincinnati with Luke Fickell. So I think like after this year, we're really going to find out what this next group of Badgers up front is really all about. So, like, if, like, 2 of these guys go down of those 3 that we mentioned, we'll see. We're going to find out really quick on what the future is going to look like up front, certainly for Wisconsin.
Awesome. Well, time is marching on, so let's switch to defense. Thoughts on Mike Tressel? So just quickly, Tressel, defense coordinator, Mike Tressel played at Cornell before coming up through small schools. Then he landed at Ohio State as a GA under his dad, then Buckeye head coach, the legendary Jim Tressel. After that, he was extremely successful at Michigan State with Mark D'Antonio until things fell apart sort of at the end. Yep. Then Tressel went with Fickell to Cincinnati and Wisconsin. Last fall, Wisconsin was 60th nationally in yards per play allowed, and they actually regressed a little bit as the season went along. They gave up 165 yards rushing last year per game, which is the worst of any Badger squad since 2005. I got to ask your thoughts on Mike Tressel, and I'm going to be honest, like for me, the biggest mistake Wisconsin made, and I've said this a bunch of times, wasn't trying to change the offense. It was changing the defense, because that 3-4 they had rolling was just unstoppable. And I guess Jim Leonard probably wasn't going to stay to be DC, but I did think it was strange that Luke Fickell didn't continue that scheme as effective as it was, and then he decided to change to a 4-man front.
Yeah, that kind of goes with stuff that we talked about at the beginning, is Luke Fickell kind of coming in here and wanting to change a lot of things. So we trying to change things offensively. We know that didn't work. Defensively, I think it's been a little bit of a mixed bag so far, to be very honest with you. How do you feel about Mike Tressel? It's up and down. It's like you see last year, for example, like a great defensive performance against one of the most efficient offenses in the country in the Oregon Ducks late in the season. Oregon was coming off 8 consecutive games. I think Tez Johnson was out for that game. Their leading receiver, there's all of that, but still, like, they are who they are. It was
undefeated Oregon. And you had them. Right,
they were the number 1 team in the country, and they played. They made it into a old school Big Ten West type of rock fight. In that type of game, and that was a really good defense. I thought Penn State. I thought the defense played well for some of the game, certainly against them. They were in it. They were in it there in the first half until the Nittany Lions started to pull away. Certainly towards the end, they're there, but then you see other performances against, look what Nebraska did late in the season. That was, I think, Dana Holgerson's first full week as the offensive coordinator for the Huskers. and you see them be very successful over the top. I think like a big thing for Wisconsin is they've taken a pretty big step back when it comes to the pass rush. And I thought they had some decent transfer pass rushers last season, but they didn't really pan out. They didn't. And I think like I've made this comparison a lot as referencing the entire team, but like it's the hamster wheel. It just keeps going around and around and around, and they can't gain any traction. They can't get their feet down and walk forward. And that's kind of the way it seems. Like the big deal for the Badgers last year, James Thompson Jr. goes down before the season starts. He was really slated to be one of the better pass rushers, one of the better guys up front on the defensive line. He goes down, and the defensive line was maybe the weakness of the football team last season. Yeah. And this year, they brought in a whole bunch of transfers. And what do we know about transfers? Half of them work out and are really good. Hopefully, sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more. So that's a big question, I think, going forward for this team. Like in many ways, this is a make or break year for Wisconsin in a lot of ways. And I think we're really going to see, and I think it might be a little bit of a make or break year for Tressel and what this defensive team because this is supposed to be Fickell's a defensive guy, right? Mm-hmm. He was a nose tackle at Ohio State. Right. Mike Tressel had success. You mentioned it at Michigan State. You mentioned it at Cincinnati, right? They coached Sauce Gardner over there with the Bearcats. So, like, this is where it all is supposed to be. But I look at this defense, and there are certainly some places where you could see some positivity certainly pop up. But, man, it's tough. It's tough. So
I know we don't have much time, but let's just briefly talk each position group. D-line, they bring back senior Ben Barton. That's a good start. UT Martin transfer Charles Perkins is getting rave reviews out of Madison from what I've heard. And there appears to be better depth on the D-line this year. And along with that, linebackers, you've got Christian Allegro, Tackett Curtis, Corey Walker, all appear slated to start. So I feel like the D-line seems like it's going to be pretty good. I'm having a hard time trying to figure out what to expect from the linebackers. So front seven, what are you thinking?
Yeah, like you mentioned, the key, I think, you got to get better defensive line performance out of this team this season. Ben Barton in there at 6'5", 323. Like he's going to be, considering that he's the guy that's coming back, he's got to be the leader, certainly up front on these defensive line. Those guys that you mentioned, if you get like two that really hit, I think now you're really working with something at Wisconsin. You go to the linebacking core. Christian Allegro, I think towards the end of last season, really started to come on and really started to look a lot better in that group. Watch out for Sebastian Cheeks as well. He was a North Carolina transfer. I believe he came in at the beginning of last season. He's maybe someone that really started to come into his own a little bit towards the end of last season as well. Tackett Curtis, he was a 4-star guy, came out of high school at USC, played 1 year there, and last year it was kind of hit or miss. So I'm very curious to see if he can maybe get back on the right track, certainly this year. But man, you look at this is just, it's such an adjustment that we've talked about during this whole show. Like Leo Chanel ain't walking through that door. Nick Herbig ain't walking through that door. It's tough.
Was it Leo Chanel who caught Bucky Irving from behind? I think it was.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah. So you've got to kind of adjust these expectations. I think there's better. I think there's some, even despite losing Wohler, I think there's some good stuff in the secondary with Preston Zachman coming back at safety, Hallman and Forkerine over at corners. I think that's Hallman's a very good corner. He had 5 or 6 interceptions a couple of years back. Forkerine, I think, because of the junior college exemptions with Diego Pavia, I think he kind of started at Vanderbilt. That allowed him to come back. Austin Brown is another guy at the nickel spot that I think really has played pretty well over these last couple of years. I think there's some good starting talent in the secondary. We'll see what the depth certainly looks like. I think overall, this year for Fickell and Tressel, can you develop these guys? Can you bring it all together? I think this is really going to tell us in year 3 just how good that these guys are doing defensively with the Badgers.
Yeah, and I saved the DBs for last because it looks so strong.
Yeah.
You know, you've
Yeah.
got a lot of experience. You've got upperclassmen. I'm glad you said for Corrine, so I didn't have to try to say it first because I was a little worried about it. But yeah, and Ricardo Hallman is a very legit, you know, you need that top cornerback with some swag. And I feel like he's that guy. So yeah, you've got a really nice secondary. And it seems like that's going to be a group you lean on this year.
I like the secondary. You know, that I think it does say a lot, despite losing somebody like Wohler, to still have that strong of a secondary.
And Xavier Lucas.
Thank you, Xavier Lucas. I try to forget about that whole situation.
Yeah,
but yeah, that's it's a good. I think the key to really maximize this group, which they didn't really have these last couple of years, you need a better pass rush. Right?
Yep.
The pass rush and coverage really go hand in hand. You got good coverage, allows more time to get the pass rush to get there. Pass rush gets there quicker, not as much time for the DBs to be able to cover, and not as much pressure certainly on them as well. So that's a combination that goes hand in hand. I think the DBs are maybe holding up their end of the bargain with talent-wise. Pass rush is something that really needs to get there more.
Okay.
Awesome. All right. Well, then let's just briefly talk specialists. Place kicker Nathaniel Vakos is back, but the kickoff specialist, Gavin Lom, I heard was giving him a run for his money a little bit, potentially. So curious about any update you have on that. And then punter Atticus Bertrams is back, which is a great name. And obviously, Vinny Anthony is a really accomplished kick returner and could be a strength at punt returner as well. So how are you feeling about the specialists?
I would probably expect you mentioned the Lom pushing him. I would still probably expect Vakos to be the kicker this season as well. He was 12 for 19 last year, so hopefully that can get a little bit better. Certainly, but hey, competition, right? That's certainly something you want to be able to improve those types of numbers. And Atticus Bertrams, he's a Big Ten West punter. I love the name. I think that he's sitting in a pretty good spot. Certainly right now. It's funny. My brother was a kicker in high school and got recruited in college. But I just, I'd be like, just don't suck, please. Just don't make it a liability, and we'll be fine. But I think Wisconsin is in a decent spot. I think with the specialists there, and then hey, we'll see if Vinny Anthony can take one back. Certainly this year, I think that'd be exciting. We talked about his speed earlier.
Child me was once behind Jason Giannini's parents, and when he missed an extra point, I went apoplectic, and they did not appreciate it. They didn't like that. They didn't like that at all. All right. Well, that's good to hear about the specialists. All right. Now let's do a little game that we love to play. And I know you've been generous with your time, so we can be quick and get you out of here. But let's play a little game we like to call the schedule game. So we've got that 2025 Wisconsin schedule. And I got to be honest, the first thing I noticed, Ted, looking at it was, man, Miami, Ohio is not necessarily the team you want out of the MAC to have to start off your season with. That's a solid program.
Yeah. Did they win the MAC or almost win the MAC?
Yeah, it was something like that. We have to play Buffalo, who won 9 games last year too. So both of us are getting that's not the MAC team you want to start the year with.
No, my hope is that, remember when Wisconsin came out and the Western Michigan, was that on a Friday night?
Yes.
Or something last year?
I watched every snap of that game. I couldn't believe it.
I did. Yeah. And the Broncos were in the lead.
It was 14-13 in the fourth quarter, I think.
Fourth quarter. Yeah, it was. Yeah. So once again, these are things I try to forget. So I think the key, remember the game against South Dakota where it's like, what's happened? I know South Dakota, very good FCS program.
Yep.
Come on. We're a Big Ten program here. Got to put the hammer down a little bit. I think the goal is what we want to see out of these first 2 games, put the hammer down. All right. Yes. Look like a Big Ten team versus a MAC team. Look like a Big Ten team versus, what are they? Sun Belt, Middle Tennessee, whatever they're in, certainly right now. That's what you want to. You don't want to see any of these struggles because, sometimes, maybe, it's, it's the first game of the year. It's the second game of the year. They're starting to get into the swing of things. But, you're a Big Ten team. Even if you are getting in the swing of things, you should be beating a team like this by 14 points, 17 points at minimum.
Yes.
At minimum. So, I want to, after those 2 games are done, I want some confidence. I want to be confident going on the road to Tuscaloosa. Yeah, it's going to be tough. This is when things get hard. But I at least want a little bit of confidence going into that. I don't want to have that doubt that I did last year because the doubt was we get them at home. It's the first year of Kalen DeBoer. All right, well, we haven't played very well in the first couple of games. Well, I guess we'll see what happens. You don't want to be feeling that. I think you want to have that confidence, and it's not only for fans, it's for the players, it's for the coaching staff as well. Because you look at a lot of the schedule, you need that confidence early in the season to be able to pull an upset here at some point.
For sure. So you're 2-0 there. Then you go to Alabama. Yep. That's tough going to Tuscaloosa. I feel like Wisconsin could have a shot there, depending on what Alabama's quarterback play looks like. But that's going to be a tough game, and it's probably one that's hard to win on the road, especially.
Yeah, that is going to be a noon game on ABC or ESPN, so It's not going to be a night game in Tuscaloosa. So back-to-back noon games for both of these games in the home and home this year. But I said it recently about Wisconsin. Like, I want them to look respectable. I want them to look like they did against Penn State. I want them to look like they did against Oregon, not like they did against Iowa, Alabama, even Minnesota, that 24-7 game at the end of the year where it just kind of looked like they gave up. I want these games that we'll talk about here. I want them to be respectable, be in games. If you go 6-6 at the end of the year, but you were competitive in like 4 of those 6 losses, I think that's going to show progress.
Yeah, absolutely. The game I have circled here in the early season, to me, is Maryland, because that's a must-win game. And I think Wisconsin should win it. But considering the whole Billy Edwards situation, you got to think Maryland's going to be motivated, and the Terps tend to look better earlier in the year than later. Yep. So I just think that's one I've got circled as I think Wisconsin's going to win the game, right? Like, I'm pretty sure you're going to win that game, but it's one I got to see. I got to see Wisconsin, kind of like you said against Miami and Middle Tennessee. I need Wisconsin to show up in Maryland and be like, we're going to run the ball for 4 quarters.
Yeah, you need to. That's a point where it's like, you'll likely be 2-1 at that point. Like, Maryland is like, if they want to get to a bowl eligibility, like, Maryland feels like a must win when we look at the schedule right now, because here's an interesting point in the season. You're like, let's say you beat Maryland, you're 3-1.
Yep.
Michigan. Let's talk about where Michigan could be at this point.
They got a true frost quarterback. Yeah, at
Oklahoma, at Nebraska in the month of September. I'm not saying it will happen. There's a chance, and I think if I remember correctly, Nebraska's like the week before or maybe 2 weeks before this game. There's a chance that this could be a 2-loss team. Now, Michigan is much more talented, than Wisconsin is. I believe that, but you did mention what is Bryce Underwood going to be at this point? Is it going to be Mikey Keene? What's that all going to be? Because now all of a sudden, okay, if you got Michigan, if you can somehow find a way to pull that one, you're sitting at 4-1, and you got a rivalry game at Iowa at Camp Randall. Now all of a sudden, your season is looking a lot different. Like, it could be a very big pivot if they could somehow find a way to get this thing going and get it going on the road to Ann Arbor. I think that's going to be tough. If they can find a way to get it done there, get it done against Iowa, they could be really headed in the right direction. I think a positive throughout there is a split. If they can find a way to split, that is a huge win. If I'm predicting it right now, I don't feel great about winning either of those games. I think Iowa, they're going to continue to be improved on offense. But if they're splitting right there, they're 4-2. They're 4-2, and I think you're sitting in a good spot if that is the case.
Absolutely. I'd also point out that you have that bye before the Michigan game.
Right.
So you should be able to really give Michigan your best shot and make that, if it's Bryce Underwood, you could make him, you could pull a lot of games and stunts and make him kind of confused. So that's that Michigan game is definitely one I've got circled too. We talked about Iowa. Then you've got Ohio State and Oregon. That's just tough. That's tough back to back.
That's just not happening.
Well, you almost got Oregon last year.
That's true. I would love to bring back the days of 2010 at Camp Randall Stadium, and that is that's about the time of year.
And we don't know what Dante Moore is going to look like, to be fair.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
They just lost their top receiver. I don't know. Maybe Oregon. Maybe
you go on the road to Autzen. It's tough. Yeah. It is tough to win in that environment in the Pacific Northwest. That's going to be like these games. Ohio State and Oregon. When I look at them and I'm like, they They got to run the ball. They got to dominate time of possession. You got to keep Julian Sand on the sidelines. You got to keep Dante and Decorian Moore on the sidelines. You got to do that. And I kind of, both of those teams, even despite what they're losing, I still think the defensive lines for the Buckeyes and the Ducks are going to be very good and feature some pretty good pass rushers. So you better hope. We talked about that left tackle before. Now with Kevin Haywood injury, you better hope that you got that figured out. But like we said, try to keep it respectable. Keep it respectable. Show that you're making progress. Don't get run off the field. Remember when Oregon played Illinois last year? Like, Illinois was a team that won 10 games, and that one was over by the middle of the second quarter. Out at Austin out there. So that's I think going to be the big challenge is starting off good against both of these teams, specifically that game out at Oregon on the road. So and like those games back to back, you look at the next part of this schedule. Man, those are going to be two of the top teams in the country, probably two playoff teams. But the next games that finish the season, none of those are gimmies. None of those are gimmies.
No, those are all tough games. John, were you going to try to get something in there?
Yeah. Well, what's interesting to me is you have 6 new quarterbacks that you're going to be playing against. So if you do have an improved pass rush, and if your secondary is as good as we think it's going to be, I mean, there's a shot here to pick up at least maybe like 1 or 2 of these games that might go your way. And I'm not, I know it's Ohio State, I know it's Michigan. Last year, Minnesota should have beat Michigan, but we won't go get too deep into that. But it is doable.
I'm so angry about that call still
to get close to that. So I think the fact that you talk about being in games, and I think there's a chance if your defense can get up to par of where you're expecting it or wanting it to be. I think you'll be in these games, if not be able to pull out at least 1 or 2 wins in that stretch there. I think that should be very possible.
Yeah, I just like when I look at some of these games down the stretch, like Indiana's going to have I think they're going to have another good offense. We know Illinois is getting a lot of press right now. I think like that's a game,
and rightfully so.
Rightfully so. Yes, wanted to make sure I throw that in there. But like all of these games, I think have some difficulty to them. Like I just like when I look at Washington and Indiana and Illinois very specifically before we get to Minnesota, like it's just. They need to just wear a team down. You look at Washington, Damon Williams, I think he's a guy that's getting he's a very trendy, I think, pick to be a breakout player right now, but they've got Boston coming back and Coleman, who is a 1,000-yard receiver. It's just it's going to be really hard to just outscore a lot of these teams. Yeah. You know what I mean? Sure. And you're not getting Illinois got all of their secondary coming back, which was really, really good last season. I just, it's going to be tough. So I think that they need to play that stuff. I think they need to play that style of game in general, but I just don't think that they have the firepower on offense. So can the run game hold up? Can the defense kind of hold up after this stretch? I mean, man, if you win 2 out of 3, I think you're feeling really, really good. I mean, even winning one of these games against Indiana, I think a lot of people are sleeping on Indiana more than they should. I think Indiana's I look at their roster; it's as good as last year. Is it better than last year? Maybe. I don't know. I don't quite know. Yeah, but it's certainly on par with that. So
and this year, their quarterback will have both ACLs.
Yeah. That certainly helps. So yeah, I'm curious. And then you get to Minnesota on the road at the end of the year. Yeah, I mean, Gophers have got a good team. Let's say it. I think it's
we won't argue with you.
Well, it's all about what Drake looks like at quarterback. If he's solid, if he's passable, there's a lot to like there. And going on the road to Minneapolis doesn't look like it's going to be a Friday, Black Friday game this year. It's going to be on Saturday. But yeah, obviously that's as big as it gets. And you keep on losing the axe. That's going to put a lot more pressure on Fickell, and maybe a decision that may or may not be made at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's put it there then. Let's say that Minnesota game, there's a chance Wisconsin's at 5 wins going into that game.
There's if you look at Miami, Ohio, let's say Middle Tennessee, let's say Maryland.
Give you Iowa.
Well, you want to give that one? Okay.
I want to give you Iowa and probably and then definitely. Well, you see.
That gets you to 4, and then you win one of Washington, Indiana, Illinois. You'd be at 5. You'd be at 5 and 6 going into that game. And that's the same record that they were at going into the Minnesota game this last season in 2024. I think like any 6 wins or above, like Luke Fickell is definitely coming back next season.
Yeah.
Another 5-7 season. Like, I think if it's 5-7, but if this team is just playing 1 possession game or 10-point game after 10-point game, I think there's going to be a little bit of a break. Like, I think last year, this is like, look what happened with like Billy Napier over at Florida, and how they really came on and they looked much better at the end of the season. If this team is looking better and if there is shown improvement, then I think, you're going to see some signs of progress from Fickell, and that's going to kind of ensure things certainly in the future. I think actually it would take a lot for Luke Fickell to get fired considering this schedule this season. So we'll see. I think a lot of people are kind of like Wisconsin is kind of faded into this area where they're just not as relevant as they used to be. You know, I kind of hate to say that personally, but that's I think that's kind of where it stands, which I think is a perfect spot for Wisconsin to come up and maybe surprise some people. You know, they're even a program that maybe myself, I'm like, man, I just don't see it. I just don't see it. And then I'm like, well, what if that comes together? What if the offensive line is good? What if the run game is good? What if this offense is balanced? What if the secondary makes some plays? And now you start to talk yourself into it a little bit. And that's maybe where I'm at a little bit more. I think the ceiling, I think this team could be, if everything goes right, I think it could be as high as 8 wins. It could be as low as 4 or 5. So it's going to be a very, very interesting season. This is a big pivot point, I think, for Luke Fickell.
Yeah, well, Ted, you've been more than generous with your time. Thank you so much for being here. We'll get you out of here. Maybe quick thought, like, let's say worst case scenario, Fickell falls off a cliff. I don't think he's gonna. I think Fickell's gonna get it together. I think he's gonna make a bowl. I think he's gonna save his job. But if you had to pick another Wisconsin coach, who would you want?
Dude, one guy I really like is Chris Kleiman over at Kansas State. My first job out of high school was working in TV in Fargo, North Dakota. So I got to spend some time around that Bison program. Got to spend some time around Kleiman in the beautiful, the gorgeous Red River Valley.
Yeah, you know it.
But yeah, he was like, I remember, I worked at the station that constantly was last in the TV ratings. And, he didn't have to give me the time of day, but he would give me and kind of everybody else the time of day. He's just a really genuine guy. He's a really good guy. And everywhere he's gone, he's found success. Now, I could coach North Dakota State to a national championship. Okay. I would love to do that. Another one. But now what he's done going from NDSU to K-State, and then what he's been able to do over there with that team, I think that really speaks a lot. He's one guy that certainly stands out to me that I think would be really good, that I think fits in, that we talked about through this entire show, of what Wisconsin is and what their identity has been and what it certainly should be going forward.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, Ted, you've been more than generous with your time. I'm sorry. I sort of apologize, but not really, for keeping you so long. So thank you so much for being such a good sport. And just say one more time where they can find your work, where everyone can find your work, and we will link it in the description as well.
Well, it's my own fault for talking all of that time about the playoff and all these other things, but I love doing it. I could sit here for another hour and talk about something else.
We could too, but then it's past John's bedtime then.
At Big Ten Ted over there on Twitter. You can find me on YouTube, the podcast platforms, certainly as well. So those are kind of the places to find me online, and looking forward to we don't wish summer away over at Big Nation and Big Ten Ted. We don't do that. That's not something we believe in. But when the season certainly gets here, once we get to mid to late August, going to be having some team previews just like we did last year, and then we hit the ground running once the season starts.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ted. Thanks for being here. Have an awesome night.
All right.
We'll
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Awesome.
Okay. That was great.
That was fantastic. I mean, Ted was more than generous with his time, and that was very cool. Really appreciate that.
Yeah. I mean, just so again, just like last time with Big Kurt, we're able to find some people that just have such a wealth of knowledge about their team, the ins and outs, and the history and the culture aspect of it as well, which is really what for me, it does need to be emphasized more and more when you're talking about these developmental programs like Illinois, like Minnesota, like Wisconsin, and when you're bringing in what seems to be, and maybe was thought of initially, and maybe even Luke Fickell thought about it, like, like kind of like this flash hire, like this is going to be the new up and coming kind of guy, and I'm going to change everything. And there was a level of hubris, not understanding the culture or the identity of a place like Wisconsin and in Madison. And not to say he can't turn it around, and maybe he will. Maybe this year that's it, and it's going to be rolling on all cylinders again. Hopefully he's learned his lesson, and we'll be able to turn it around. But like hearing Ted talk about it and what you and I have grown up seeing with these teams that come out of Madison, no matter who's coaching there, it was always this same thing, like he said, and not having that identity, I think is what has just clearly set them back. And so if he's able to implement that and bring it back to the way that it was, like Wisconsin absolutely could be another solid program just the way that they were. It's kind of odd to me, and I wanted to say this to him. I know we had limited time with him, but I was kind of curious, like, because Wisconsin was always like a perennial like top 20 team, like in the preseason polls, like no matter what happened, like that's just what they were, and more often than not, there was good reason to have them there, I'd say.
Yeah,
for a long time. Now it's interesting to me that like not there hasn't been a lot, but like why hasn't Wisconsin, who has had more sustained success, I guess, in recent history, like they aren't getting that benefit of the doubt, but yet we're continuing to give like teams like Nebraska or Auburn or whatever, like in like these top 25 polls, but Wisconsin, who and Luke Fickell with his track record, I don't know, it's just these are the things that don't make sense to me. Like and I guess going back to the College Football Playoff Committee, that I think is a freaking joke. And it's all this.
It's different rules if you're in the SEC, man. They still are acting like Oklahoma's going to be really good.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, Auburn, who's been nothing but terrible because they had a good portal class in a year when the portal was weak. So like suddenly you think that's going to get them over the hump to beat a bunch of SEC team? Like, I don't know. I'm not convinced by that at all. I liked it. Yeah, that was great. I think Wisconsin's in a position, it's kind of make or break for Luke Fickell, and that's a dangerous team to play against.
Yep.
Because they know their coach is on the line. They know their backs are against the line. They know that if Fickell gets fired, there's no guarantee the new coach is still going to want you around.
Yeah.
So they're playing for a lot too. They're playing for a lot. And if I really think it comes down to how good are those running backs, really.
Yeah.
Because if they're good enough to carry the offense, Wisconsin's going to be dangerous. If they're not, and you have to put it on the arm of Billy Edwards, I think you're in trouble.
Yeah.
But that said, if they're running the ball well, I think Billy Edwards can do a good job as a complementary piece and not as the focal point of the offense like he had to be at Maryland.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And, but you're right. Like, because it's also the difference, we've talked about this as well. Like if this has to be reliant upon the pass game because the running backs are not up to par, there may be some solid talent there, but like, are they like on the level of a Ty Felton or a Caden Prather that he had before? And I understand that there's going to be a better offensive line there, which is obviously going to be a huge help and will hopefully allow him to get some time if he doesn't have top level talent like Prather and Felton to get them the ball, which is obviously that's a factor. But it's a little. I get there's just a lot of questions still, I guess, surrounding him. But again, like you said, in all fairness, Maryland and their total lack of an offensive line was a key part. And we talked about that. We talked about that when we previewed Maryland about what are they going to do without Talia Tagovailoa and his legs and his ability to escape in the pocket. And we saw.
Yeah. So. And but that said, if Wisconsin can run, Billy Edwards is fairly mobile also.
He is.
So that could open things up a little bit. Like if you run that zone, is Wisconsin run the zone read a little bit and maybe keep teams honest? That could help too. I mean, I'll be honest, John, after talking to Big Ten Ted, I'm gloating less and I'm a little more worried about the Axe game.
I am too. I think there may not be, from what it seems like,
because they could be playing for their lives in that game especially if they have 5 wins.
Yeah. Well, and
You
the
know?
thing is from what it sounds like and what, you and I have looked into, it's not that there's any like really, at least as of right now, that could all change obviously once the games start being played, but there's no real standout superstar, but there is a solid team across the board, at least at the starting positions for the most part.
Yes.
So, and like you said, you equate, because this is college football, you put in all of those other factors, the emotional aspects of losing your coach, or not knowing where your future is going to be. So yeah, there's a desperation factor that comes in, and that's a real thing, and that's a scary team to play against.
Yeah, the team that wants it the most wins a lot.
Yep.
And Wisconsin could be the team that wants it the most if they rally together, right? It can go either way when the pressure's on. Either you rally together and you get stronger than you ever were before, or you start to fray at the edges and fall apart.
Which we saw last year.
Yep,
yeah. They did. So yeah, this is such a huge test for Luke Fickell, man. I mean, I know dude, this is a lot on, it's these new hires, it's the new offense. It's to me, the biggest test is to keep that cohesion and really establish whatever culture it is he's trying to get there, and keep that team playing as a team, because you lose the locker room, man, it's game over. And that's what it seemed like last year. It seemed like he lost the locker room in a big way. So we'll see.
I don't know about that.
Really?
I know Ted said that he felt like they gave up in the Minnesota game, but I just saw them get whipped.
Well, there was that.
I mean, Luke Fickell called it their Super Bowl before the game.
Yep.
So I feel like if he had lost the locker room, he wouldn't have been calling it his Super Bowl. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
Unless that was like a last ditch effort to get them back, but I don't know.
I'm not, and I think Minnesota definitely outplayed them, pretty much on every aspect on the field last year. But I think I do think that it just seems like there was something off, and we talked about it all year, even from the beginning of the season. Like you talked about with Western Michigan, South Dakota, this was weird, man.
It was a weird year. It was a weird team. It was a weird year.
And so that's where I'm thinking, there was and you heard things from different, ex-players that were saying, you heard weird things going on Twitter about some things that made
a lot of distractions.
So it made you question what kind of control does Luke Fickell have in the locker room, and what kind of culture is running there, and is it going to work? And we'll see. I think he's a great coach. Obviously he's a fantastic recruiter. This guy,
amazing recruiter, incredible recruiter. Yeah,
he's just got to put it together, man. He really does. And if he doesn't, I think Ted's right that it's going to be, it could be dangerous. I don't know if he'll get fired, but I think he's going to be on the hottest of seats, and they are going to be already having some other people lined up if they need to pull the trigger.
Yeah. At the same time, if he goes 7-5 against that schedule, he'll be the toast of Madison again.
Yes, he will. Absolutely.
And rightfully so.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's that tough a schedule. It really is a thing where if they win 6 or 7 games, you call it a W for Wisconsin.
Yep.
And that's not hating on Wisconsin. That's just saying that schedule is a gauntlet.
Yep.
And they didn't just get the best teams, but they got all the second best teams. Do you know what I mean? They got not just the helmet schools, but they got all the schools that are the best out of that next tier. They got Illinois, they got Indiana, they got Iowa, they got Minnesota.
Yeah. It's
they got Washington, Yeah. And it's that's tough, man. They didn't get Purdue, they didn't get Northwestern, they didn't get or I guess they got Maryland, but they didn't get Purdue, they didn't get Northwestern,
UCLA or
they didn't get UCLA, they didn't get they didn't
Rutgers,
get
no,
none of that.
It's wild. Yeah,
so,
that's a I feel, and there's a I do not envy anyone with that kind of schedule. That's got to be one of the top 3 toughest schedules in the country.
I think it's the toughest schedule in the country. I haven't seen anyone else's that's hard. I know people say Florida schedule is really hard, but I just
Well,
I think it's as tough as
the SEC. So
Vanderbilt
is essentially Washington to them. So
yeah. All right.
But I love that rant though. I love that whole thing about talking about the SEC and the college football playoff. We are 100% on.
I wanted to rant more, but Ted just ranted for us.
Well, but we all could have gone for that whole.
Oh yeah, we could have gone for an hour and a half on that alone.
Yeah. So He nailed it, man.
No, he did great.
Fantastic guest. He's You're wonderful, Ted. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on, man.
Yeah. Thanks, Ted. We do appreciate it. John, anything else you want to say before we get out of here?
Yes, as always, you want to find We Live for Saturday. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Podcast Addict. You can find us on Twitter at We Live for B1GSat. And you can find Mike here at Alibaba26. You can find me, John, at Norwegian Gopher. You can also email us, We Live for Saturday, b1g@gmail.com. Please follow, like, subscribe, tweet, retweet, all that good stuff, especially here on YouTube. We would really use the help. Thank you.
Awesome. Yep. Appreciate it. Thank you for everything. And I know it's been a lot lately. We just did an awesome thing with Big Kurt. We just had Big Ten Ted, but we're not done yet, folks. We're previewing all 18 Big Ten teams. And on Tuesday, that's right, it's Sunday, already on Tuesday, we're going to have Daniel House, Mr. Gophers guru himself, to preview the Minnesota Golden Gophers. So we just got the Wisconsin preview. Now you're going to have the Minnesota preview. You're going to have the whole rivalry.
Be great.
Yeah, and I'll be putting all of our previews in a playlist on our YouTube site. So if you missed our Illinois preview or any of our previews, go back and check them out. We've got them all. They'll be there. They're evergreen until the ball is kicked. All right. Well, John, thanks for everything. I know you are ready to go to bed, so we'll get out of here. John's an early riser, but he's not. He doesn't love late nights. It's not his thing. And that's fair. All right. This is fun. Thank you so much, everybody. I definitely didn't think we were going 2 hours, so this has been crazy and lots of fun, and we will see you in the next one.